celebrating a saint. How Mother Teresa is remembered around the world. Back in session, Congress resumes the fight over Zika funding, why it was derailed by Planned Parenthood. Presidential politics, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump trade jabs on the campaign trail. And honoring a conservative activist, how Phyllis Schlafly helped shape the pro-life movement. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, September 6, 2016. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lauren Ashburn. The world gives thanks for Mother Teresa. The tiny nun who cared for the poorest of the poor is now a saint. Her canonization comes near the end of the Jubilee Year of Mercy. Tens of thousands of pilgrims gather in St. Peter's Square to witness the canonization of Mother Teresa.
We declare and define Blessed Teresa of Calcutta to be a saint, and we enroll her among the saints.
Known as the Saint of the Gutters, the Roman Catholic nun devoted her life to helping the poor. She founded the Missionaries of Charity in Kolkata, where hundreds of nuns and visitors clapped with joy Sunday during her canonization.
Worked here, she died here, and so Mother has brought her presence, her work of love to the poorest of the poor in Calcutta.
The Nobel Peace Prize winner died 19 years ago, a relatively short period of time to be declared a saint.
I think that she spreads an amazing message. She was an amazing woman, and so I think it's really important that this day has finally come for a lot of people.
In honor of Mother Teresa's lifelong mission, organizers bussed in 1,500 homeless people to the Vatican. They were given seats of honor at the Mass and were served pizza after the ceremony.
The teachings of Mother Teresa has helped me a lot to understand the concept of love for the poorest of the poor.
The Vatican's delegation to the UN teams up with an international religious freedom group to celebrate Saint Teresa. Their Leaving No One Behind exhibit in New York features the Albanian nuns' work for the poorest of the poor. Catherine Zeltner spoke with the organizer.
Doug Napier is executive director of ADF International, a group advocating for religious freedom worldwide. He joins us from Scottsdale, Arizona. Doug, what strikes you most about Saint Teresa of Calcutta, and how can she be a saint for our times?
Saint Teresa exemplified everything that is good about people being able to freely live out their faith. And one thing that ADF International stands for is protecting the space so people like Saint Teresa can go out, serve the needy, defend the defenseless, protect the unborn, and do it in a way that the world will recognize and is now celebrating.
You mentioned that your group is focused on religious freedom. Are there examples of how St. Teresa really promoted that cause?
Well, she did by living it out. And she went into a country that is only about 3% Christian. And we actually have a relationship with an entity there that we're affiliated with that is defending the right for Christians to not only exist in that country, to be able to live out their faith. And because she has provided such a good example of what good can come from that in the country of India, but also her model has now spread around the world. And ADF International is working around the world to be able to allow people like St. Teresa to do that kind of good by protecting religious freedom everywhere.
Now tell us about St. Teresa's importance to the United Nations. What role did she have there?
We have a display that we're going to be putting up this week at the United Nations to commemorate not only her life around the world, but also the impact that she had at the United Nations. She came and addressed the United Nations in 1985 and gave a very powerful message about if we're going to accomplish world peace, how that's going to happen. It's going to happen through the example that she has in speaking to protecting life. She was very clear about protecting life and protecting people of faith. And so the United Nations is in a unique position to do that, especially with the genocide issue that we see. And we're working with the United Nations Security Council to make sure that they will protect minority faiths like Christianity around the world, so people like Mother Teresa don't feel like their lives are even being threatened when they do the good work that she did.
Doug Napier from ADF International, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Congress's summer break is over. Both the House and Senate are back in session tonight, but it's about 20 days before their next pre-election break. Jason Calvi tells us what's on their long to-do list. Jason.
Lauren, the pressing issue here at the Capitol is funding the federal government. That funding runs out at the end of this month. Tonight, senators are voting once again on the fight against the Zika virus, but it's once again running into Planned Parenthood-related roadblocks. It may seem like deja vu here at the Capitol. Lawmakers fought over funding to fight the Zika virus before they left town in the middle of July. It was then that Democratic senators blocked the $1.1 billion proposed to fight the virus. They said Republicans were stripping money from Planned Parenthood.
It's hard to explain why, despite their own calls for funding, Senate Democrats decided to block a bill that would keep pregnant women and babies safer from Zika.
But Republicans rejected our efforts to compromise. Republicans were more interested in attacking Planned Parenthood.
It's the same thing we heard from the senators back in July. Republicans say Planned Parenthood had nothing to do with this fight. They say money just was not allotted to Planned Parenthood. Lauren, we're going to see a lot more of this. The 20 days they're left right here before they retire for election season and the final push to the campaign. You're going to see Democrats and Republicans blasting each other every day.
Well, how do you think they're going to be doing that, Jason?
Well, just look at this week's schedule. On Thursday, the House Oversight Committee will have a hearing once again on Hillary Clinton's emails. They're also calling for a hearing to look into the $400 million that was given to Iran. As you know, Republicans have called that a ransom payment. On the other side, Democrats today taking to the Senate floor to blast Republicans for failing to pass gun reform legislation. Lauren?
Jason, we'll be following that very closely. Thank you very much. And President Obama says U.S. commitments to the Asia-Pacific region will endure over the long term. In Laos, the president says he's worked to rebalance our foreign policy so the U.S. is playing a larger role in the Asia-Pacific region. Today, he announced the U.S. will give Laos $90 million over 3 years to help remove unexploded bombs that were dropped by the U.S. during the Vietnam War. President Obama canceled a scheduled meeting with Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte after Duterte cursed President Obama. The cursing came when a reporter asked Duterte how he planned to explain to Obama the killings of drug dealers. The UN Security Council strongly condemns North Korean missile tests and threatens further action. President Obama was virtually next door as Kim Jong-un engaged in another provocation against America. While the president met with world leaders at the G20 summit in China, Kim's regime fired 3 medium-range ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan. South Korean military officials say the missiles flew about 620 miles and were launched with no navigational warning. A senior U.S. official tells CNN they could have threatened commercial aircraft or ships in the area.
I would say that that's probably North Korea's intention. Their calculation, their gamble of trying to be provocative, of saying, look at me, getting the attention during the G20 summit.
Japan's defense minister tonight calls the launch a serious threat, saying the North Koreans have learned from their mistakes with these missiles. The evidence, he says, the 3 missiles landed at almost the same spot at about the same time.
3 missiles in the same spot, that could have damage on an airfield. The kind of concept of operations of lofting one while doing a depressed launch of another. They may have a sophisticated concept of operations for the missiles that this test might have been demonstrating.
This is the second time in less than 2 weeks that Kim Jong-un has fired missiles which landed inside Japan's zone for identifying threats from the air.
Japan is an inviting target because they're rich, they're relatively soft, at least compared to the South Koreans, and they're the former colonial masters.
Kim also endangered his own people by firing these missiles. They flew from the western part of the country, east more than 100 miles, before they were over the sea. Analysts say Kim cares less about hitting innocent people on the ground than he does about his own power circle. Kim's generals, they say, may be pushing him to be more aggressive.
He has to constantly guard himself. He is continuing to purge people, circulate people, create insecurity among the higher ranks of the military and security services precisely so no one gets any ideas.
A new poll shows Donald Trump closing the gap with Hillary Clinton. The CNN ORC poll gives Trump a slight lead among likely voters, 45 to 43%. The broader group of registered voters still favors Clinton, 44 to 41%. And in a rare move, Hillary Clinton chats with the press aboard her new airplane. Hillary Clinton suggests the Russian government is seeking to influence the U.S. election by promoting the hacking of Democratic targets, and she criticized Trump for not releasing his taxes. Clinton says Trump must have something to hide.
He said that the American people don't care about his tax returns. And in fact, he's also said that it's none of our business. I just think he's dead wrong.
Clinton and Trump nearly crossed paths yesterday in the swing state of Ohio. Video shows both of the campaign planes parked side by side at the Cleveland airport. And Clinton released a new ad criticizing Trump's comments about the military, but dozens of retired military leaders have come out in support of him. They signed an open letter released by the Trump campaign calling for an urgent course correction in national security.
We really appreciate all of those generals and admirals that today endorsed me. We have a
almost 90.
These are the fighters.
It's unbelievable.
Almost 90. And these are our fighters. These are our fighting generals.
Donald Trump continues to reach out to African American communities. He met Saturday with members of Great Faith Ministries in Detroit. Reverend Derek McCoy is National Director for Clergy Relations at CURE, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Now, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Lauren.
Your group calls African Americans a crucial voting bloc that cannot be ignored. Has Donald Trump ignored them until the last 2 weeks?
Great question. Well, I think he has misstepped perhaps prior to these last 2 weeks. But I think over the last few weeks, he is beginning to get it together. He's beginning to focus his thought process and his campaign towards really reaching these African Americans.
Is it too little, too late?
Well, I don't think it's too little, too late. It can never be too late. Should they have started earlier? Absolutely. However, I think it's one of those things where if he has that concentrated effort, he understands that it's a viable voting bloc, and it's really important. So,
tell me about, we're looking at video right now of Donald Trump speaking out at Detroit on Saturday. You said you watched the speech. Tell me what your thoughts were.
Well, you know what? I looked at it, and when I saw that speech, I said, wow. What a Donald Trump. If we had seen this Donald Trump months ago, I think he'd be farther ahead in the polls now, because I thought it was a genuine speech. It had so much emotion to it. He had a great temperament to the delivery of the speech, but also it had solutions, and it had a real sensitivity to the issues that are actually happening in our community. So I think it was great.
Did it bother you that he was reading off of a written script?
No, not at all. I mean, everybody's going to read off of a written script. I think it said, hey, he's taking a little bit more time to make sure he gets it right.
Has Hillary Clinton locked up the African American vote? The polls show that African Americans voting for Trump are less than 5%. So why is this outreach even important at this point in the game?
Well, I think what we have today in today's time is a lot of African Americans are dissatisfied. They want to find new solutions. They want to understand, how can I get my kids in better schools? How can I have school choice? A lot of them are thinking about the issues that are happening today and really are dissatisfied with maybe how some of their unique environments have been run.
Well, let's take a look at Chicago today. For example,
Absolutely.
500 killings so far, murders this year in Chicago, inner city Chicago. And this is under a Democratic mayor and president.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that you can see, Donald Trump was smart in his speech where he said, hey, you know what, this, to have violence and whatnot in your community should not be the case. And this is a civil rights issue for African Americans. And I think that he hit the nail on the head with that one. But I think you're right. The disillusionment of the things that have been going on in terms of the policies that have been in place have to change.
All right. Thank you very much, Reverend Derek McCoy. Appreciate your time.
You got it.
Coming up, we remember Phyllis Schlafly, why the female activist fought so hard against the Equal Rights Amendment. And lighting the torch, athletes prepare for the Paralympic Games. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Longtime conservative activist Phyllis Schlafly has died. Phyllis Schlafly was an outspoken leader in the 70s, known for her fight against the Equal Rights Amendment. But as Wyatt Goolsbee reports, she also led millions in advocating for a pro-life, pro-family movement.
Lauren, Phyllis Schlafly died of cancer yesterday afternoon in her home in St. Louis. Even at the age of 92, she was still active in conservative politics.
This is the cream of the pro-life movement of our country. We are gaining every day, and you are part of it.
She's known as the First Lady of the conservative movement. In her time, Phyllis Schlafly was one of the most polarizing figures in public life. She will long be remembered for organizing grassroots campaigns against communism, abortion, and the Equal Rights Amendment. Schlafly was a constitutional lawyer who got involved in conservative politics in the 1950s, attending every Republican convention since 1952. She attended her last convention as a Donald Trump delegate. But she says her greatest legacy was the Eagle Forum, which she founded in 1972. The conservative group now has chapters in several states with tens of thousands of members. Schlafly's staunch social views extend beyond any one party. Evangeline Bartz with Americans United for Life says people on both sides of the aisle have been inspired by Schlafly's pro-life views.
We're all about the mother-child strategy, that we should not separate the mother and her unborn child. And Phyllis Schlafly very much believed in that. She promoted a pro-woman, pro-life vision for America.
Schlafly says protecting family values is what led her to oppose the Equal Rights Amendment in the 70s, not because she didn't believe in equality between the sexes, but because she thought there was a hidden agenda for tax-funded abortions and same-sex marriages. In her last interview with EWTN News Nightly in April of last year, she spoke about the gender wage gap, saying many don't take into account women who work part-time or take time off to mother their children.
Certainly a lot of mommies feel, and the statistics bear them out, that their babies do better if they have a few years of mommy care instead of commercial hired baby care by somebody paid by the taxpayers.
Schlafly remained active in politics by writing a column and by doing radio commentaries. The Eagle Forum says funeral arrangements are pending. Lauren?
Thank you, Wyatt. A black belt judo fighter with Down syndrome lights the Paralympic torch in Rio de Janeiro. Breno Viola, originally from Rio, was the first athlete with Down syndrome in the Americas to earn a black belt in judo. He's won 2 world titles in his class and is an international symbol for Down syndrome. In 2013, he acted in the first ever Brazilian film starring actors with Down. Viola will run with the Olympic torch in Recife. Up next, tropical weather. Severe storms batter coastlines from the Pacific to the Atlantic. And Cuba Connection, how new flights from the U.S. could lead to stronger economic ties between former foes. Hurricane Newton makes landfall in Mexico. The storm hit Baja California near the resort city of Cabo San Lucas, stranding thousands of tourists. Now it threatens the Mexican mainland. Forecasters believe Newton will eventually turn north and bring rain to Arizona. The storm, once known as Hurricane Hermine, continues to cause trouble. It struck Florida last week, then traveled up the Atlantic coast, killing 3 people. The storm is still creating dangerous waves and rip currents from Long Island to Massachusetts. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Paris is opening its first refugee camp next month in a former railway depot. The city's socialist mayor says the 400-bed men-only center is designed to take migrants off city streets for 5 to 10 days. They'll have time to decide if they wish to seek asylum and to receive medical and psychological care. British Airways travelers cope with delays globally due to a computer glitch. It was a glitch in the airline's check-in system. Social media is buzzing with complaints. The airline says passengers are being checked in at Heathrow and Gatwick airports, but the process may be slower than usual. Last month, the computer outage forced Delta Airlines to cancel 2,300 flights, costing that carrier $100 million in lost revenue. Cuba hopes a wave of American visitors will bolster the country's struggling economy. For the first time in more than 50 years, U.S. commercial flights to Cuba resumed last week. And 10 U.S. airlines could earn hundreds of millions of dollars in new business. And Cubans hope that high-tipping Americans will transform cities that have seen few American tourists in the past.
Una cosa muy buena porque llevamos tantos años prácticamente en esa separación y al
This carpenter says tourism is a good thing since the countries have been apart for so many years. Now, obstacles for tourists include limited hotel rooms and poor infrastructure. Joining us now is Ana Quintana, a Latin American policy analyst and at the Heritage Foundation. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
You're also Cuban American.
Yes, I am.
And I understand you're not in favor of all of this. Why not?
No, honestly, I feel it's a bit premature, and considering the drastic human rights violations that continue to occur, and the human rights violations that have actually increased since the president decided to normalize relations with Cuba, it seems a bit premature to grant the regime this concession.
Well, we still have an embargo against Cuba, and all that we're doing here is sort of almost like some sort of executive order where we are allowing our airports and people to go in, but only if it's a people-to-people mission.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? How is that different?
What we're actually doing is kind of redefining the terms of the embargo via executive order, right? Well, Congress has overwhelmingly shown this past year that they do not support what the president is doing, nor do they support lifting travel restrictions. So it's, again, the executive redefining the law.
Let's talk about Christians and what's happening in Cuba. Your family escaped from Cuba, if I'm right?
Yes, they did.
And you're also saying that there have been a lot of human rights violations in Cuba that continue.
So Christian Solidarity Worldwide reports that from 2014 to 2015, religious persecution has increased tenfold.
In Cuba?
In Cuba, right? There have been over 2,300 documented cases of religious persecution. In 1 year, there have been over 100 churches bulldozed, and that's only in 3 provinces, 100 whole churches.
I went down to Cuba with President Obama when he first visited, and I did speak to several nuns and to several religious who said that they don't feel it as much, but that nuns and priests who want to come into Cuba have a very difficult time because of what you're saying.
Well, that's exactly it. The Office of Religious Affairs in Cuba is obviously controlled by the Communist Party and by the government, and it's a very restrictive environment.
Many people are going to travel to Cuba and they're going to go visit their family. Isn't that a good thing to come out of this?
Oh, I definitely think it's a positive thing for people to reconnect with their family after such a long time. But Cuban Americans have always had the opportunity. In fact, what we're seeing now, though, is an increase in tourism, which directly benefits the Cuban government. This year alone, over 300,000 Americans without any ties to Cuba are visiting the island for tourist purposes.
Well, that's what shocked me when I was there, is that there were Germans and English and Australians and French, and they were all tourists there, but there were 0 Americans.
Well, that's exactly it. And to be honest, tourism and mojitos and cigars, that's not what's going to bring about a democratic change in Cuba. So it's really not benefiting the people.
Okay. Yeah. Ana Quintana, thank you so much for joining us. You're a Latin American policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation.
Thank you.
Well, that does it for us this evening. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Lauren Ashburn. If you can, follow us on Facebook. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter, and you can follow EWTN at EWTN. We leave you tonight with more images of Sunday's beautiful event, the blessed canonization of Mother Teresa, who is now Saint Teresa. Good night, and God bless you.